A few weeks ago, we released a new video talking about the ad formats on Spotify. If you're interested in that, you can check out this video right here. And as I was going through that demo, I noticed some new targeting options that would allow you to target music versus podcasts differently that I hadn't seen before. And I teased that we would be putting together a new video. Well, this is that video. From the user perspective, there's quite a big difference when you're listening to music compared to a podcast. And luckily, through Spotify, now there is for ad targeting as well. In this video, I want to run you through that new podcast targeting so you can start using it in your campaigns. All of the new podcast targeting options that we're going to look at today will live at the campaign and ad set level settings. The easiest way for me to show you that is just to create a new campaign from scratch. I'm going to give this campaign a name so that we won't end up having errors as I go through the next steps. And now we get to choose what we are promoting. So if I scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there are 3 categories. The first is for a brand, product, or organization. Second is for an artist's music on Spotify. And the third is for a concert or an artist's merch. You'll see that on the first option, there's a little section of text that says new in green over here because you can promote your brand to music and podcast listeners. And when you hover over the question mark here, it says podcast ad placement is only available for campaigns promoting brands at this time. Basically, if you were hoping to use this new podcast targeting setup for promoting music on Spotify or some merch or a concert, that's not available quite yet. The way that they have this worded makes me think that it'll come out later, but for now we need to focus on just a brand, product, or organization. So I'm going to check the box over here. It's not a box, but you guys get it. And then I'm going to come down here and click next. Similar to the campaign name setup, I'm going to create just a placeholder ad set name so that we don't have any errors. Next, we get to choose where to place our ads, and this is where we get to distinguish between music and podcasts. I'm going to scroll down a bit, because each time you make a change on either the music or the podcast front, the targeting options down below will change. Originally, if you chose music, you would first choose your ad format. Let's just keep it as audio to keep things simple. You'd then adjust the platforms based on what you want, and then you can scroll down, and past the schedule and budget section, you can add in your target audience. I'm not going to go too far in depth on this because we have a video put together that walks you through all of the Spotify targeting options, and you can check out that video in the top of the screen right now. For now, I'm going to scroll back up to where we choose our targeting type, and now I'm going to switch it to podcasts. The first thing you'll notice is that only the audio ad format is available. You cannot use video, whether horizontal or vertical, with the new podcast targeting options. That said, there is an additional section down here below that talks about delivery on and off Spotify. Podcasts are delivered on Spotify as well as across a wider network off of Spotify. But there is a limitation to where you can only see reach and frequency data for the placements that are on Spotify. You will not be able to see those for those placements that are off of Spotify or around their wider network. Spotify does provide a link here if you want to learn more about the technical aspects of how they deliver ads off of Spotify, but for this video that's a little too far in the weeds. Now I'm going to scroll down and we'll start getting into some of the new targeting options. You can see that the platforms are still available, but now we start to see additional targeting options that were not available for the music targeting. The first piece is going to be on competitive separation. The goal here is to prevent your ads from playing next to similar ads. If you're a car dealer, you don't want your ads to run alongside other car dealers. You might get conflated with the wrong brand. It could just be overload. You just want to stay away from your competitors and similar ads to where it makes it so you stand out anytime somebody hears your ad. The first option we get to choose is what your industry is. So if we click this drop down, you can see here, first one is automotive, so I did a good job giving an example there. But there are a handful of other industries in here that you can choose from. Whether it's energy, oil and gas, there's finance, food and drink, all sorts of different things. You can just type in the box, but I'm just running through this really quickly so you can kind of see it. And just for fun, let's choose travel, which is the latest industry down at the bottom. Now within the travel industry, we get to search for our product or service. Now you can see that this secondary line has been customized based on the choice that I made up above for travel. We have adventure travel, airlines, auto rental, budget, business travel, family travel, all sorts of stuff in here. So depending on what you're offering, you can just choose house rental. And now the goal is that Spotify will not show your ads next to somebody else offering house rentals in the travel space. Personally, I love this section. I think this is a great way to make sure that you don't have your ads populating in podcasts with all the same type of ad messaging, since all of you are probably trying to target the same types of people because you have the same type of business, you offer the same type of service. It's really important to make sure that you don't overlap too much. It would be very annoying if you were listening to a personal finance podcast and you heard 3 ads in a row that were about life insurance. That's just a lot. You're going to get muddled. You're not going to remember the brands. It's not a good user experience, and it's not a good advertiser experience either. So if you're trying to promote your brand through podcasts, make sure that you have the industry and your specific product chosen. Next, we can adjust content controls, which says that you can build a placement environment best suited to your message by excluding topics that don't align with your brand or targeting relevant episode topics. So the first section was trying to make sure we don't show up alongside competitors effectively. And this next group is trying to make sure that we don't show for topics that aren't in our wheelhouse. So if I click this arrow here, this section will expand a little bit. And we get 2 options that align with that first intro that I said. First is that you can exclude sensitive topics. Think of this as brand safety because you're trying to make sure that you don't show up alongside topics that aren't a good fit for your brand. It does mention that all content must meet user guidelines to be eligible for ad placement in the first place, but it might make sense for you to exclude further placements. So I'm going to check the box here. And now we get an option to select episode topics to exclude. So if I come over here and click this down arrow, now we have a list we can choose from that looks very similar to other sensitive topic type of control centers like they have in Google Ads, for example, where you can exclude content around alcohol, gambling, conversations about terrorism, all the good stuff that you probably should stay away from. Each one of these does have its own little information bubble here, so if you're not entirely sure what will be included in those groups, you can hover over that and try to get a little bit more insight. They're not always extremely specific, and more often than not, if you're on the fence, you probably should just exclude it. For now, I'm going to uncheck the Exclude Sensitive Topics section, so it won't alert me that I need to pick one. Now let's talk about the second option, Target Relevant Episode Content. And they describe this by saying, to provide the best opportunity for delivery, we target all podcast episodes by default. You can choose to limit targeting to episode topics relevant to your ad. So now we're not excluding anything. Now we are actively opting into episodes that are about a topic that we want. So if I check the box here, we get another drop-down list that we can check boxes for. And these are going to look very similar to the industries that we chose before. In this instance, I've chosen to use travel as an example of the industry that we're in, and we are trying to offer housing rentals. So it's probably a good idea for us to opt into the travel section and make sure that we're showing our ads on podcast episodes that are about travel. That's a pretty easy area for us to opt into and choose. Depending on the performance we see here, it might make sense for us to also opt into other topics, maybe real estate or maybe home and garden, something along those lines. Because as we all know, machine learning isn't perfect. So if it hears in a podcast episode that something is about a house, it might categorize it as real estate or a home, rather than understanding that it is about housing rentals during travel. So depending on the performance you see from your main category, or if you think you fit into multiple different ones, it might make sense for you to test it out, be a little bit more broad with your targeting options, and see what type of performance you can get. For now, I'm going to close this section, and you'll still be able to see at a high level that we have travel included in our topics. If we scroll down a bit, you'll see that we still have the schedule and budget section, but there still is the target your audience section down below. Right now it's defaulted to effectively broad targeting, but if I come over and click on Edit Audience, you can see that it opens things up a little bit to where we can choose the country and the location, so we still have that option. We can then choose age and gender, and that's it. That's the bottom of the page. So while we get the great control of choosing what type of ads we run next to, what type of content we stay away from, and what type of content we opt into, we do not get to utilize any of the additional interest targeting, anything like that you get with the music targeting. For podcasts, those new controls are the only options that we get. Overall, I'm still pretty impressed with the different targeting options that they give us in the podcast section. I think it's pretty cool to be able to narrow the competition and control your content, whether exclusion or opting into specific types of episode content. It's a lot more control than we've been able to have in the past. And as I mentioned in the intro, the user experience is quite a bit different when you're listening to music as opposed to podcasts. So it makes sense that the targeting options aren't the exact same anymore, and that podcasts have a bit different tilt on them. Personally, I have not run any ads to podcast listeners specifically, so if any of you out there have, I would love to hear about your experience. But as always, if I didn't cover something that you want to hear about, please leave us a note in the comments below. Thanks for watching our video. If you thought it was useful, give us a thumbs up below.
We release a new video at least once a week, so if you want to get notified of when a new one comes out, be sure to subscribe to the Paid Media Pros channel.